Good morning, Africa. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, Akwa Ibom State. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning, a great day to be alive, and of course, a good day to rise and shine with you. Good morning. My name is Uyai Anekan.
And I'm Francis Oyemade. Glad to have you join us. This is Rise and Shine Tuesday edition. Get up and, of course, get going. I know some of us are already on our way to work. Some of us are about leaving the house. But wherever you are, just know that today is a beautiful day. And there are a lot of opportunities for you today.
Well, of course, on Rise and Shine, we talk Nigeria and all of the issues pertaining to us as a people. Would like to encourage you to be a part of the conversation, so please do take advantage of our social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrumtv.ng. We'd love for you to send your contributions, your concerns, your questions. Also take advantage of our phone lines that will be displayed on the screen in the course of the program. Let's get your thoughts this morning.
Well, of course, on Talking Nigeria, as always, in Rise and Shine, we'll be looking at the key issues. We'll talk about the promoting of local content, of course, where the advertising practitioners of Nigeria have advised that advertisers should begin to produce all of their content locally. We'll also look at the hike in gas price and the crisis surrounding that. Of course, very recently we've had development of solid minerals making the headlines across board, and the federal government resolved to further invest into that sector. We'll also be looking into that. Of course, the education loan that was announced by President Ahmed Bola Tinubu within the first few months of his office, some of the policies he rolled out, we'll look into that, as the federal government said it will be, kick-starting by January. We're not forgetting the fact that Forex crisis is still very much on. We'll look into that. And of course, the statement made by the new CBN governor, Kodaso, who has spoken about the fuel subsidy removal and what it means for the Nigerian people. And of course, in the long run, a bit of all the issues that we will be looking at. Of course, different social investment programs or schemes initiated by the Ahmed Bola Tinubu's administration. We'll look into these programs and how they're faring, or how they will fare, given the different issues that are already being raised by Nigerians about it. Of course, yesterday we saw the Supreme Court hearing the case between Atiku Abubakar and President Ahmed Bola Tinubu. We'll also look into that. And of course, like we had said, it's time for you to join the conversation. The phone lines are on. You can leave us a direct message, or you can connect us on our socials, spectrumtvlive.ng, and we'll be very much delighted to talk to you this morning.
Of course, very, very delighted to speak with you this morning. But let's go to our very first news, the flash news this morning. We are seeing great works happening in Osun State, as led by Governor Adeleke, and these moves are really strong at this time. Of course, the governor of Osun State, in the person of Ademola Adeleke, has given a directive going forward that no state government official, no state government top official of his administration for the rest of the year will be permitted to go on any foreign trips. Of course, he said the only exception for any member of his cabinet at the top tier to make any foreign trip at this time will be for reasons of emergency. Now, of course, he directed the head of service, Leye Aina, to prepare a memo to that effect, and to see the relationship between commissioners and special advisors to make sure that this enhances smooth governance process. Now, I think why this caught our attention this morning is the fact that a lot of Nigerians are celebrating this move made by Governor Ademola Adeleke of Osun State. I know I've read a few comments that said we only would wish that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu would take leave of this kind of stride and make sure that ministers or political office holders at the apex will take on this kind of move. No foreign trips, no quick headache, let's go to London, and all of those kinds of things. A lot of people have really commended Governor Ademola Adeleke of Osun State for this particular move that he has done. How is it going to impact upon the quality of governance that they have in Osun State? First of all, capital intensive. We are looking at the fact that it is going to cut away expenditure with regards to, travels and all of that. Usually, when you hear that a certain person in a certain ministry is traveling, you're going to count upwards of 5 to 10 persons that are going to travel with him or her. You're going to look at hotel logistics and all of that. If all of this is cut away, we are going to see Osun State saving quite, a sum with regards to, these particular trips. But now this injunction is for the rest of the year, which just leaves us with 2 months. What happens from next year? Hopefully that, there might be permutations that if we see how effective this has been in these last 2 years, in these last 2 months of the year rather, then maybe we might see him looking for a new regulation on how to stabilize incessant travels amongst his cabinet members.
Well, it's a good move, but of course, like you rightly mentioned, it's just about 2 months, and most Nigerians, in as much as they commend the move by Adeleke, I would say it is coming rather too late, or it should be sustained if we are to see the anticipated or expected output or result of the ban. But of course, it's coming at a point when Nigerians are calling for cost of governance to be drastically reduced. So when you see foreign trips, you see the number of people who are involved. You need to see the amount that is being voted for each of the government officials going abroad, and what that means for the economy of the state, what that means for the finances of the state. So it's a good move made by Adeleke, but the sustainability of that move into the rest of his administration is significantly going to change the narrative. And like most Nigerians would say, it can also be adopted. But of course, another school of thoughts across Nigeria would also say, don't cut short foreign trips for politicians. Rather, let it be based on the need. Like we know, the Senate president is currently outside of the country for, a conference that requires his presence. For people like that, situations like that, you definitely have to allow, these politicians go represent the country and do what needs to be done. But for those frivolous, you have a fever, you want to travel for fun, for vacation, when you have a job to do, it definitely calls for a serious look into it, and of course trying to place embargo. But beyond the pronouncement, there are expectations also. A delegate should be able to send an executive bill to the State House of Assembly. Let's get to have a piece of legislation that backs up that move. Let's make it constitutional, so this is not just a delegate speaking as the governor, but this is also something that has been enshrined into the constitutions of the laws guiding the political office holders in Osun State. That will significantly help. And of course, if we can also adopt that in Nigeria, then we will be able to cut the number of people who travel outside the shores of Nigeria for little or nothing, just because they know the funds are already there and the funds are not going to come, or is not going to come from their own personal purse. So it's a good move, very highly commendable. But of course, the anticipated effect will come if that move is sustained.
Of course, it's looking at the fact that there is a need to sustain the momentum of their service delivery in the state, of course, and it says one way to do that will be to avoid excessive spending on recurrent and overheads in the state. Of course, he actually did acknowledge that they do have needs for accommodation, offices, and other things, as cabinet members in the state. But he's saying that the resources that they have is lean, and until they are able to do otherwise with regards to how much of an income that they have as a state, he's going to implore people in his cabinet to cut down on certain things, and he has sent out an instruction for a memo to that effect. Let's see how that will be effectively done. So it's more like looking at the main situation on the ground and giving policies and instructions that are in line with the realities on ground. It's not that the state is barely struggling, and I think it's different from when an individual says, oh, they're going to use their own money and go for vacations and all of that. That's fine. But he's saying, even as a public office holder within his cabinet, he won't just move like that. And number two, like I had said earlier, when you're saying, oh, interview these, conference these, you go for one conference in Addis Ababa, the state has to spend an overhead cost. He's saying we are not going to do that anymore, and this is really good. Let's see if the desire of Nigerians to see this being replicated across the 36 states of the federation, and especially at the presidency, Let's see how much money we'll be saving. But let's move away from that. Former governor of Akwa Ibom State, Udom Emmanuel, of course. For those of us who remember quite well, he is an economist. Had worked in the banking sector for several years before he came to Akwa Ibom, became the governor. We know that one thing that his administration was heralded for was, the peace that Akwa Ibom enjoyed under his dispensation as governor. I mean, so of course we see him giving a speech at the London summit, recommending for certain priorities for sustainability of peace. Now he was of course recounting his experience in Akwa Ibom State, some of the things that he had done differently for peace to be enhanced in the state at this time.
Well, the comment by the governor is not sitting well with every quarters of Akwa Ibom State. I mean, when you look at some of the policies that came out during the last, quarter of his existing from exiting from office, you would also hear the yearnings and aspirations. In fact, many hold the opinion that his last days in office set the ground running for conflict and crisis in the state for his successor, Governor Pastor Umoino. You're talking about the remapping saga and the issues surrounding it, the internal and communal clashes and fighting that has ensued as a result of that. You're looking at, the breakout of violence as a result of that. Of course, that is still very much on ground with cases in court and the governor still consistently calling for calm. Pastor Umoino now consistently calling for calm while trying to resolve the matter. Well, if you look at other indices apart from the few move the governor made during the last few months of his, stay in office, a lot of people will give it to him that as the chief security officer of Akwa Ibom State, he was able to, hold the people together. And of course, we also have to be very thankful to the men and women of the armed forces, from the police to the army to the Air Force, the Navy, other paramilitary organizations serving in Akwa Ibom State. They contributed their quota to making sure we maintain and sustain that relative peaceful environment that, gave the state the status of being the most peaceful state in the country. So yeah, we can commend him for some of the great things that he did. Of course, that doesn't take away the fact that he also made some mistakes that is still not sitting well with Akwa Ibom and is still a cause for concern until it is being addressed.
Well, the three priority areas that Udom Emmanuel did highlight. We talked about priority on welfare of citizenry. It would be great if Akwa Ibomites would tell us if they felt that under his dispensation. Welfare of the citizens, citizenry, I beg your pardon, political inclusion, and equitable distribution of resources. Now, these are the things that he enumerated as the three factors that will help any government to move on peace. The big questions will be, when you look at citizen welfare under the leadership of Udom Emmanuel, what will the average Akwa Ibom person say? Would they say that they were touched by welfare projects or welfare moves under his administration? Political inclusion. That's also a very big question. How did Udom Emmanuel play the politics of his day? Did we see a lot of people caught across the different local government areas? I remember that one thing that he was really accused of during his dispensation was the fact that he attempted to take everything in terms of some of those projects he did to his own local government, that's on our local government now. And okay, some people were for him, some people were against him. So, talks like, if he takes these things to other local governments and they do not give him the peace that he needs to allow them, foster, won't he take it to his own local government? So when you're looking at political inclusion, that's another big question. How well did Udom Emmanuel do? Because now that you're having these summits on the international platforms and explaining, it's also going to bring you under the radar and under the, reflection beam eyes of people, especially Akwa Ibomites. Let's tell the tales. How well did he do?
Well, the summit has already generated a lot of reactions. I know I've read a lot on the social media. I've read a lot on news blog. I've had people outside the shows. Akwa Ibomites also the shows of the country speaking about all of the things that happened at the summit. But when you look at political inclusion, was Governor Udom Emmanuel actually politically a father to everybody? You look at Project Spread. The people of Warren are crying up until today 8 years of his administration, and the only access road connecting a road to the major city is still in the worst state ever. And you're talking about being able to spread development to the state. We had the coordinator of retired primary school teachers and their next of kin yesterday. And when you're looking at welfare of the Akwa Ibom people, these are people who have given Akwa Ibom state their 35 years and deserve the best of welfare packages. How did the Udoma administration fare in making sure that these group of people were taken care of? That's a serious question. Was he able to address their needs? Over 38 billion naira as debt to retired primary school teachers and the next of kin. And then if you sum up to state civil servant, local government workers, you're looking at about 70 billion naira as posited by the coordinator of the Akwa Ibom retired primary school teachers and their next of kin. So when you look at that huge debt burden on the state when it comes to welfare, it raises a big question mark to what the governor said during his administration. Because when you are speaking, the indices that is happening in the lives of the people needs to show forward that what you are saying is actually what happened. But when you speak and then the data and the indices does not tally, it raises a big question mark. Now, we cannot take away the fact that it's almost, I think, apart from the era of architect Obon Victor Tar, and we might even want to, a lot of people might even want to excuse it, where development was just surfaced around Uyo metropolis. The interior parts of Akwa Ibom State didn't see things happening until Akpabio came into existence and then began to open roads, began to open ways up. Yes, we saw those, opening. Ikorekpene is where it is today because Akpabio took the bold step to also expand that development. And today Akwa Ibom can boast of, having some of the best road network because somebody took the bold step. Then Udomi Manuel came. It was expected that we'll have a lot more of such projects. But of course, it was tilted towards everything heading to now. Even, the remapping project has been, there have been allegations that, all of the move was to cut some of the coastal lands and add it to Una so that we can know that, okay, Una can also become an oil-producing local government or community as it was not before. So all of those concerns will make Akwa Ibom might tell you a different story, completely different narrative from what the governor is saying. But one thing we cannot take away from the governor is that during his tenure, we were able to, and we can look back and say, the likes of Ibom Air came into existence and became one of the best carrier airlines in the country. We cannot take away that fact from him. We cannot take away some of the key signature projects that he's been able to do in the state. And we can also take away the fact that, yes, every administration has its own strength, has its own weakness. They have things that the people will remember them for in a good way and things that the people will also remember them for in a bad way. But it's left for that administration to, from the scratch, understand what went wrong and what needed to be fixed. And when you leave office, I think one of the biggest problems we have with our politicians is that most times when they leave office, they don't holistically, realistically tell themselves the truth. There is nothing wrong in you admitting that, you did great in this area, but you did not too good in this area. And so there is need for an improvement in this area. So your successor would know what needs to be addressed. But on the whole, well, the governor did his part and government is continuing. So we keep watching and see how Governor Pastor Umono will continue in that landscape.
Well, you've said the most important things about that. Do we want to continue to praise former Governor Udomi Manuel? Well, that will be for Akwa Ibom to decide. But let's move on. The ARCON, of course, the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, has called the attention of producers in the country, producers of indigenous advertisement. Now they're saying, advertisers should not move out of the country to get resources for advertorials and all of those things. Adding, of course, he said that this will reduce unemployment and improve the national economy. Let's not export our voiceovers to other, nations of the world and other, advertising-related needs. But I think of recent, we had this conversation where it sounds like every now and then these regulatory agencies will think that we're actually exporting the work that we do, when in real time, a lot of people are just doing these things within the country. For instance, when you hear, maybe adverts on television or on radio, and then you're thinking, okay, this person, this must have been an advert done from outside the country, when it's probably one of the OAPs in that particular, facility or establishment getting the work done. But when we see Arcon saying that advertisements should be locally produced and no longer exported, yes, one of the first key points is that they want to reduce unemployment to make sure also that the money is regulated within the country. But what exactly are the pros and cons of Arcon making this demand on advertisers at this time?
Well, there are certain questions you first and foremost ask. AGCON is a federal government agency. Now, they want broadcasters, they want advertisers, they want companies, they want businesses to make sure they produce their adverts in Nigeria. There is nothing wrong with making that statement, making that decree, or urging people to do that. But let's ask a very, very pertinent question. Do we have federal government in this country patronizing meat in Nigerian goods?
Big question.
So if you, as the government of the day, you are not patronizing meat in Nigerian products, how do you expect people who are coming into your country to do business to then patronize the artists or the talent that you have? Because you're already showing the people that you have inferior things, you have inferior talents, and so you're going out. So when you go out, you're leading by example. You have no moral standing to now demand of others to do what you yourself as a government is not doing. So the first way to go is for the government of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu to prioritize consuming made in Nigerian products. If you want to get things for government officials, from clothing to vehicles to everything, let's start from there. When you do that, then by the time federal government agencies now issue directive, letters and memos, or call for stakeholders meeting and then make their new policies direction known, stakeholders are going to obey, because you've already led in the right part of letting the people know that you have absolute confidence in the talents that you have, in the things that are being produced in your country. But when you have not shown that example that you have confidence, you do not have the moral standing to begin to demand. Yes, will this transform the landscape? I mean, sometimes you sit down and you hear advertorials and you're like, so is it like we don't have somebody in Nigeria who can actually do this? Of course the answer is yes. We have a lot of great, people with some. So sometimes you just sit and you hear people talk and you're like, oh my God, where was I? Why didn't you give me this kind of voice? But of course, I mean, God gives us whatever he had posited for us and how he intends for us to use it. But then, for us to be able to harness what we have in the country, the policy direction, the example must come from the top. When the top is leading, it will be easier for other companies, whether Nigerian-owned companies or foreign companies coming into Nigeria, to adhere strictly to what you have. Let's even look at the local content quota. How is it being enforced across board? We have it in the law, but do we follow through? Is there a monitoring a process or a monitoring agency that is really deliberate, that is really intentional, that is really committed to monitoring compliance across boards? We see local content quota. I think the last time we hosted someone from the maritime sector, Honorable Adawadi, he spoke glowingly about the fact that the local quota in Nigeria is not being looked into. So you have the local quota, but yet you still have expatriates taking over the local quota that was meant for Nigerians. And yet there is nobody monitoring it. There is nobody looking into it. There are no punitive measures. There are no sanctions being meted out to these companies. So how will you then improve on your own people? How will you now grow your own economy? How will you now advance the skill sets of your people when the implementation is not there? So it has to start from the top. We need the political will of the leaders. It needs policy direction. It needs showing by example for us to get there. And we know that, yeah, if we are able to get it, then of course, I know that Arcon and other agencies within the advertising subsector of broadcasting and media world are trying to also make it crystal clear for people who are seeking to get a career in advertising, purely advertising, get to focus a lot more and get certifications, trainings, and all of the things that they need. But for us to get there, my dear, we need a whole lot of political will to execute it.
Well, of course, we see the fact that Akron is saying all commercials to be exposed to Nigeria should be produced in Nigeria. Key factor there, so that jobs will be provided for youth. Of course, also help grow and develop the support service sector of the industry and circulate money within the Nigerian advertising ecosystem I think those are like the most important issues that have been highlighted there. They want money to, circulate amongst their ecosystem, and, some other issues like that this morning. But of course, we are still looking at several things this morning happening around the country. At this time, the Ember months are closing in on us, and the holidays are imminent in a few more weeks. But we see that there is concern as gas prices have gone up again. There's been a gas price hike, and Nigerians are wondering how they're going to, fare in this particular season. Of course, we saw marketers built to meet the Senate. Of course, they're also blaming cabals for this particular experience with regards to high prices right now on gas commodity.
Well, it's always a very sorry situation, and I don't know how long Nigerians are going to live like this. I don't know how long we're going to be each other's greatest enemy. I don't know how long people are going to do business with greed at the center of their operations, because it's literally like people just sit down and know that, oh, it's Ember month, let me make some extra money off of Nigerians, and then they just boom decide, let's hike the price of fuel, let's hike the price of gas, let's hike the price of foodstuff. Like literally, I have never, since I was born into this country called Nigeria, I've never seen a year where you get to the Ember period and bag of rice are still sold as it was in January. I have never seen a year that you get to December and petroleum products are sold in the exact prices that they were sold in January. I have never seen in the history of this country that things starts in January and it flows seamlessly year in, year out, and that there is no hiking anywhere. So it is a tradition a tradition of some sort for marketers, for people who are into trading, to intentionally, deliberately hike prices of foodstuff. Now you ask the question, what is emboldening them? Because we are supposed to have Consumer Protection Council of Nigeria. We're supposed to have government agencies regulating the prices and making sure that Nigerians are not shortchanged. But why are people able to wake up from whatever side of their bed they wake up from, put up prices of products in Nigerian markets, and Nigerian people are being forced to buy? But there is no government agencies going after these people. There is no punitive measures being given out, and absolutely nothing being done year in, year out. And then you expect that we are going to see a difference happening there's definitely nothing going to happen, because what that means, Nigerians will tell you, for people to be able to have that boldness, to have that confidence to know that whatever I wake up and do, nobody's going to do anything. It means there are people who have compromised their integrity. There are people who have compromised the rights of Nigerians. There are people who have sold out the conscience of Nigerians and will do anything just to get their own pocket further enriched at the detriment of Nigerians. So until we get to that point where there is that commitment on the part of government officials, there is that commitment on the part of the government itself, then of course we'll continue to see these problems spiraling out. Right now, I think gas rose from about 700, it moved to about 800, it moved to 900. As at the last time, it was 1,000 naira. I think as the last 2 weeks, it was 1,000 naira. And just yesterday, I heard somebody say she bought gas 1,100 naira. And I'm like, okay, in just 2 weeks. So what is going to happen by the time we get to December? We might buy 1 kilo of gas at 1,500 naira. And then you're putting that side by side with the price of fuel, then the price of kerosene. How will Nigerians survive?
It's a big question that we are going to continue to ask, but with all of the promises that the president has made, some of the palliatives still coming in, we hope that the Dangote refinery will start functioning somewhere before the end of this year. All of these policy reforms, we are just waiting to see how this is going to affect the prices of things, nationwide. We're looking at a very strong order of inflation as it stands, because a lot of people are not able to keep up with the economic, downturns. We are seeing a lot of businesses that have closed down at this time as a result of difficulties with, having funds for logistics, whether it's your own car or you have to pay someone else to do it. It's a major burden for some people in the country at this time. But let's see how, it was 2 or 3 months ago that the price of, gas had really come down and people were celebrating to be able to have it at that cost. When you're looking at over 1,000 naira to be able to get a kilogram of gas. Now that is putting Nigerians on the edge.
Of course, it's putting Nigerians on the edge. It's already biting, but we do hope that the federal government will be able to, address the concerns. Yeah, because in the event that that doesn't happen, we might be heading out for one of the worst, festivity in the history of Nigeria. Because you're looking at a whole lot of people not being able to celebrate, the festive period. But we see on the last flash news story this morning that the federal government has backed the drafting of a new policy to regulate solid mineral sector. Of course, this has been, I think this is like the new trend of conversation since the Ahmed Bola Tinubu's administration came on board. We've had the ministers of solid mineral looking at issues about unbundling. We've had the federal government issuing directive for collaboration between states and the federal government as far as mining of the solid mineral is concerned. I mean, we've also had moves to invest more into the mining sector in the interest of Nigerians. But how this is going to span out is still a big question. Will Nigeria, or does the Nigerian government have the willpower to seriously look into mining and mining activities in Nigeria? We know the move for licenses of miners was also made by the federal government, and of course we were given this time bound for all people who are involved in the mining sector of different solid minerals to be registered and become documented as far as Nigeria is concerned. And of course the collaboration between states and federal government will mean you don't just obtain the license at the federal government level and you're not known in the state. That has been posited as one of the reasons why we have a lot of illegal miners, mining in different states. So people can actually, forge those documents at the federal level and then get to states and say, oh, we have a license from the federal government to operate. And then, of course, the process doesn't go to the state, it doesn't go to the federal government either, because none of those people actually issued, that directive. So finding this level of collaboration and moving towards drafting policies that will help regulate the sector is definitely a step taken in the right direction. And it's coming at a point where Nigerians are clamoring seriously for, investment into diversifying the nation's economy away from oil to agriculture, solid minerals, which of course we have across the different states of the Federation.
Well, these are moves that we need to see implementation. Like we always say, we have good policies in Nigeria. Implementation of these policies are the real issues. And like you rightly said, we've seen a lot of ministers come on board and drafting new policies, and more like, or just updating on the blueprints available in their ministries to be able to do new by, the renewed hope agenda. Let's see how effective these things are going to be. Can we, take our eyes a little bit off, oil and gas, and let's look into solid minerals. How much resources, how much benefit is building that sector going to have on the economy of the nation. So these are things that we must look at collectively. But implementation is the biggest problems that we continue to have about the country. We see the fact that Federal Executive Council has approved the creation of Humanitarian and Poverty Alleviation Trust Fund. There's been a lot of social net programs instituted, especially from the former the just gone administration of Muhammadu Buhari. Now, when we came into the Tinubu administration, they tried to look into some of those initiatives that were done and the problems and the lapses that they saw. Let's use Empower, for instance. We are hearing of upgrades being done, and eventually, activities will return back to normal. But when we have a Humanitarian and Poverty Alleviation Trust Fund, how is this exactly going to work to benefit the everyday Nigerian? It still takes us back to the question and the conversation of the social register that is meant to be, generated at the federal and the state levels. Let's be able to collate and have information about everybody. So if we say that this is going to start soon by January, how much underground work have we done and carried out to make sure that once the federal government kicks off with this initiative, it can actually run smoothly without any kinds of issues?
Well, setting aside, $5 billion US dollars or $5 million US dollars annually for poverty alleviation, is not a problem. The problem will always come down to implementation. when you say $5 million US is going to be set aside annually for this particular program, how is the federal government going to spend that money? How is it going to utilize the money? What are the indices put in place to make sure by the expiration of the first 1 year, we're going to be able to look back and see that so number of Nigerians who were living below poverty index have been taken above poverty index by this social investment scheme, by this poverty alleviation scheme or trust fund that is being instituted by the federal government in the event that it's being, actually implemented. Now, you move away from that, you also ask the question, how long is this trust fund going to last? How sustainable is it? Where is Nigeria going to get the money to fund the trust fund? $5 million US is no small money. So when you look at all these indices and then you ask all the critical questions, it raises a whole lot of concern. Now, of course, the approval was given yesterday by FEC, and Dr. Betari, the Minister for Humanitarian Affairs, while addressing State House correspondent, revealed these to all of us in Nigeria. But then also, we're looking at those who will be saddled with the responsibility to supervise the funds. Are we going to have another agent of government with funds seated, meant for Nigerians, the poorest of the poor, being wrongly utilized again? Are we going to have conversations about embezzlement, pilfering from the public treasury? Right now, we're being told N-Power is being investigated. How long is the investigation going to be? And the lapses that is being probably will be, figure out what is the move that the federal government has put in place, to take care of those lapses. So it is not just about rolling out these policies. Nigerians would always tell you, there are laws, there are policies. The problem comes down to implementation. The problem comes down to sincerity, transparency, accountability on the part of those who have been saddled with the responsibility to mind the system. Until we solve those very root problems, we are not going to make any headway with all of the social investments. I mean, look at those who have been part of the Empire program. Because of the corruption in the system, most people go back with half or even less of what is being budgeted for them on a monthly basis. So how do we intend to see transformation? How do we intend to see, people being lifted out of poverty when the people are not even getting what is meant for them?
Well, these are big questions. We need to see more proactiveness. We know that, the likes of Better Edu have been doing the most since they came into office, but we must see that this is a realistic venture to have. But let's move away from that particular story and quickly do a rundown of the Supreme Court seat. Of course, yesterday was Monday, and all eyes were on, the media to see what exactly was going to transpire in the hearing, the appeal hearing of Atiku Abubakar's case against Bola Ahmed Tinubu with regards to the February 25 presidential election. But we see here, of course, the court is asking Atiku Abubakar to prove alleged forgery beyond reasonable doubt. Now, that's something that Atiku Abubakar was serving in the court. In spite of how much he has done already, the court is asking him to prove that that result was forged.
Well, when you bring a case, you definitely will have to be ready for all the things that will play out in the court. It's not just enough. Remember, speaking with, I think, Barrister Keminurum, when the issue of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal verdict was very much making the rounds in Nigeria, and he said, it's one thing for you to provide evidence in the court. It is one thing for you to provide evidence. You can have hundreds of bags, thousands of bags of evidences, provided within the court. Do you have, witnesses who are going to speak to those evidences that you've, provided? Do you have people who are going to testify to those evidences? Do you have credible witnesses? Not just any witness, So when you have certificates or you've gotten the details, the academic records of Ahmed Bola Tinubu from the CSU, there have been a lot of conversations going back and forth about whether it was forged or it wasn't forged. It comes down to how much you are able to present before the court. It comes down to the credibility of your witnesses. It comes down to the credibility of the documents you're presenting. And it comes down to the competency of your lawyers and of course their ability to back their claims and their standpoints and arguments up with relevant laws as far as the Federal Republic of Nigeria is concerned. So, like Nigerians had anticipated, it's not going to be a walk in the park. It's serious business, and you have to show proof, because this is not just a case. It's a case that can destabilize the country. It's a case that must be critically looked into. It's a case that, you know, one wrong mistake can turn things around for the worse in Nigeria.
Of course, this is definitely where we're going to put the stories to rest. We'll bring you more developing stories on the front pages of our national dailies. Let's head straight now to Daily Spotlight, where we bring you information from the front pages of our national dailies. Stay with us.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421, and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Of course, Daily Spotlight bringing you information from the front pages of our national dailies. Let's see what the papers are saying this morning. Our first stop will be The Nation. The very big story there on the front page of The Nation says Supreme Court grills Atiku's lawyers over CSU documents. Apex Court dismisses APM's appeal, reserves judgment in Atiku Obi's petitions, of course. We also see here victory in $11 billion P&ID UK case excites presidents and EFCC. Courts voids multi-billion-dollar arbitration. We also see here coast clear for Ododo as Supreme Court dismisses Adeyemi's appeal. Federal government confirms January start of student loan scheme. We also see here FEC OK's $5 billion annual fund for humanitarian poverty alleviation. Forex crisis, federal government will inject $10 billion in weeks. Ondo Assembly pushes ahead with Ayede Tiwa's impeachment. CI gets another letter to set up appeal. Last story here on the front page of The Nation. Senate uncovers duplications in Southeast Road contracts. Page 7, and that's all we have on the front page of The Nation newspaper.
And next up this morning is the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. The kicker there says PNID. Excitement as Nigeria wins $11 billion UK court case. Corrupt officials, private firms can no longer hold nations hostage. Tinubu judgment remove risks to Nigeria's assets abroad. AGF. The story is on page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune. Students' loan to take off January. Tinubu says plans underway to improve foreign exchange contracts. Fuel subsidy pains will be short-lived, he adds. Page 25 and page 8 has a story. Federal government targets $5 billion annually for humanitarian poverty alleviation tax fund. OK's $3.45 billion for 5 projects, including $700 million for adolescent girl child education. That story is on page 12, the Nigerian Tribune. Supreme Court reserves judgment in Obi Atiku's appeal against Tinubu's election, dismisses APM's appeal, defeat awaits you, APC tells Atiku PDP. Page 21 has a story. Of course, those are the major stories you find on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
Moving away from the Nigerian Tribune, our very next stop will be Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust, of course, big problem this morning. Federal government automates forex transactions as naira slumps to 1,220 naira per dollar. This is something else, Francis. Where are Nigerians running into, especially due to our dependence on forex for almost all the trades that we have in the country? Literally, the Central Bank of Nigeria and economists need to sit down and review some of these policies and how we can do better by, our currency. Well, of course, admits liquidity, pledges to clear forex backlog, come up with critical reforms. NESG urges government help manufacturers with subsidies, says Don. We also have Gaza war, obey international law, Western leaders tell Israel. Intrigue, suspense as police investigate murder of Maiduguri housewife. Page 3. FEC OK's $3.45 billion loan to finance power and other projects. Insurance sector grows from 827 billion naira to 2.33 trillion naira in 2022. Another story here says Supreme Court reserves judgment in Atiku Obi's appeals against Tinubu. APM withdraws. Nigeria wins $11 billion debt case against P&ID. Of course, that would mean more money to the country. But how are we going to spend it? Bandits invade casino community, kill 9, abduct 7. Very, very sad story. And that's all we have on the front page of Daily Trust.
And next up is Daily Times this morning. The major stories there, the kicker says $11 billion UK case vexes P&ID. Buhari Malami Nigeria win after over 5 years. Commercial Courts of England and Wales delivers verdict. That story is on page 4 of Daily Times this morning. We also see Advent drags Arkan Ministry to court. Of course, still on the front page of Delta Times, Senate uncovers fraud in East-West Road contract. That story is on page 5. Crisis rocks FMC as about over intent is the next story you find. And those are the major stories you find on the front page of the Delta Times newspaper.
Our very last paper this morning will be the Punch newspaper. Big story there. Tinubu certificate prove alleged forgery beyond reasonable doubt. Supreme Court tells Atiku. We also see here court, of course, reserves judgment on Obi and Atiku's appeal. Also dismisses APM's case. Atiku insists on CSU evidence. Ex-vice president's disposition invalid, says Tinubu. We also see here UK court dismisses $11 billion US P and ID suits. Nigeria demands damages. Federal government plans $10 billion to stabilize Naira, eyes NNPCL for Forex. We also see here FEC OKs, $3.5 billion World Bank loan for power and other projects. When we hear the mentions of all of these kinds of money, one would think that they're going to do things immediately that will circulate and help the country. We also see a Diane Dam, flood sacks Ogun communities. Government declares emergency. Israel arrests 120 militants. EU backs Gaza aid. We also have that page 7. Slain Nigerian students. NIDCOM probes murder. NANS demands justice. Last story here says FGIHS plan $1 billion to tech talent communities. And that's what we have on the front pages of our national dailies.
Of course, those are the major stories you'll find. You can find them out and, of course, read it up. But we'll take a short pause here and head out to the news brief next. But Mary Joseph is standing by to take us. Just stay with us.
Every day marks a day of significance.
That in view of the apology tendered by this former minister who had earlier been cleared by this August Assembly,
as we face critical issues, developments and events which shape our social and political landscape here in Nigeria and beyond. Political Spectrum is a program specially designed to help make sense of all the moving parts of developments and occurrences in our nation's polity and political economy.
There is nothing wrong with Nigeria, but there's everything wrong.
The educational history of public figures holds significance beyond mere biographical details.
From executive, legislative and judicial developments at national and subnational levels to international diplomacy and relations.
Join us for exclusive interviews with key political figures, expert opinions, analysts, thought-provoking conversations for and against, shedding light on the major issues that matter. We will always keep you updated on the most factual, smartest and unbiased reportage.
Stay tuned to Political Spectrum. Political Spectrum. All sides matter at the round table. Political Spectrum. Exclusive to Spectrum Television.
Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people. But there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the Constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian Police Force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian Police Force.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the Matters Council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but you can't be talking about cases which are in court.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding you, your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships determines how well people, relationships, organizations thrive and how long they stick together. Join Uyai Anyekan on Connect every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on channel 421 on Star Times to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories and how to navigate relationships and family life in the 21st century. Real people, real faces, real stories. Connect live on Spectrum Television.
government, Secretary General, delegates.
Disastrous day in Lagos, Nigeria today as we want to recover 40 lives in Plateau County.
A very good morning to you and welcome to your morning news briefing Spectrum live from Uyo. I am Mary Joseph. We begin the news brief with Nigeria's leader, President Bola Tinubu, who has approved the appointment of Dr. Abdullahi Mustafa to serve as the Director General of the Energy Commission of Nigeria, ECN. A statement by the President's Special Advisor, Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngalale, he said that President Bola Tinubu expects the new ECN chief executive to make a positive impact on his administration's intensive push to diversify the nation's energy sources towards industrializing every part of the country. Away from that, the Federal Executive Council (FEC) has given an approval for the creation of a Humanitarian and Poverty Alleviation Trust Fund. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Peter Edu, who stated this while briefing State House correspondents shortly after the FEC meeting at the Presidential Villa, Abuja, said the trust fund is to enable the federal government to respond promptly to humanitarian situations in the country. According to her, the federal government hopes to raise at least $5 million annually in the trust fund. Away from that, a former head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, has called for adequate investment in the education sector in order to build a formidable society. Gowon stated this during a Thanksgiving service to mark the 20th anniversary of Africa International College and Africa Community School in Abuja on Saturday. Represented by his brother Dauda Gowon, he said issues in the educational sector such as out-of-school children, school safety and others were intractable, hence the need for involvement of all and sundry. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Association of Liquefied Petroleum Gas Marketers has accused terminal operators of incessantly increasing the price of gas exploited and limiting its availability to Nigerians. The marketers, led by the Association President Oladapo Olutoboso, on Monday told the Senate that the Nigerian natural liquefied gas has been consistent with its supply, but the cabals have disrupted the availability of gas to Nigerians. Olutoboso labeled some of the marketers as the cabal who were buying the product cheaply from the source and selling it at a high price to them. On the foreign scene, Israel has confirmed that 2 elderly women have been released by Hamas, but their husbands are still being held in captivity. Meanwhile, one of the daughters said she remains focused on securing the release of her father and other hostages who remain in Gaza. It brings the total number of hostages released by Hamas to 4, as 2 American Israelis, mother and daughter, Judith and Natalia Rana, were released from captivity last Friday. And in sports, Tottenham Hotspur returned to the top of the Premier League as goals from Son Heung-min and James Maddison comfortably saw off Fulham. Spurs had only dropped points this season in London derbies against Arsenal and Brentford, but they were always in control against a limited Fulham side. Captain Son curled in an excellent goal in the 36th minute after Calvin Bassey's poor pass was cut off by Mickey Van de Ven. We'll have details of this and many more in our news at 12. I am Mary Joseph. This is Back to Rise and Shine, where we have Francis and Uyai on standby. Do have a wonderful morning.
As of state and government, Secretary General, delegates.
Disastrous day in Lagos, Nigeria today as we want to recover 40 lives in Plateau County.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
hereby grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the Constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigeria Police Force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian Police Force.
No, my Lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My Lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My Lord, the Matters Council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my Lord, but you can't be talking about cases which are in court,
Is
my Lord.
this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my Lord. These cases are in court, my Lord. I'm just reminding your Lordship.
My Lord, sorry, my Lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships determines how well people, relationships, organizations thrive and how long they stick together. Join Uyai Anyekan on Connect every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on channel 421 on Star Times to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories on how to navigate relationships and family life in the 21st century. Real people, real faces, real stories. Connect live on Spectrum Television.
Welcome back and thanks for staying tuned. This is still Rise and Shine. And we're being live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. Of course, Mary Joseph just brought us tidbits of global news, information of things happening around the globe. We've had some conversations so far on Rise and Shine. For you to catch up on all that, you need to get to our YouTube channel where we stream live and also on all of our other social media platforms. Remember that all of our programs are streamed live on our website at spectrumtv.ng. It is important for you to be a part of the conversation. Let's know what your thoughts are as a Nigerian with regards to what's happening in our country. Of course, at this point, we are going to be having conversations with our resource person as we'll be looking into several issues happening in the country. Of course, I'm being joined here this morning by Mr. Marvel Essien, who is an organizational development and human resource consultant. Good morning, sir. Thanks.
Good morning. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to hear. It's been like it's been a minute since I last saw you.
Yeah.
It's good. So I'll just ask, how is Nigeria on your end?
We are actually on the edge as far as Nigeria is concerned at this very important period of our economic development, especially the economic scene and the political scene. In fact, we just have to pray for everything to stabilize in Nigeria.
When most Nigerians will hear you now saying we just have to pray, people might just come for you and ask, all of the prayers that we prayed in the years past, where are the results of the prayers, that we have prayed? But it looks like we are just turning hands from one issue to the other. Do you really think that there is a time that we will stabilize as a nation? Because things have really gone heated up.
Yes, maybe because of the kind of generation that is coming up in Nigeria, we are likely going to have a change. At the moment, the pressure is so much on Nigeria. In the next few weeks, we are going to see a new Nigeria if the Supreme Court makes a judgment that is pleasing to Nigerians.
That is a really troubling twist, because I mean, what would be put in the context of a judgment that will be pleasing to Nigerians, that would affect the outlook, you know, of Nigerians on Nigeria, as it were. But since you've already taken us there, let's start from there. Let's start from Atiku Abubakar's case, with appeal case, of course, against President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The tribunals had ended. The Tribunal Petition Council had given their verdict. Now they moved the appeal to Supreme Court. Of course, that of the APM have been dismissed. So it's just that of the People's Democratic Party and the Labour Party that is left. First of all, dismissing that of APM and leaving these two, do you think that is by reason of, you know, the fact that these other two parties have a stronger leg in the case as opposed to APM?
Certainly. The PDP and Labour Party, they have a stronger leg in the case. Of course, dismissing that of APM is something that should be done to allow the judiciary concentrate on the critical issue relating to that of Obi and Atiku. As we speak today, you know, even yesterday, the commentaries from some of the justices in the Supreme Court has already sent jitters to some Nigerians that are they going to be fair in this judgment if over a glaring evidence situation like this, you are asking a question that may depict that of incompetence in the part of judiciary, a question that shouldn't have arisen in the first place at all, that was asked by one of the justices, wasn't a very good signal for Nigeria or for Nigerians. That is part of the things that the judiciary really need to sit back to look at. Even if it was a joke, that's not a point in Nigeria that we should be joking over a situation like this. I think the judiciary need to put their acts together and see how they can come up with a judgment that is going to be very, very clear and beneficiary to the stability of Nigeria as a nation. You see, when you look at this article, LP Labour Party case, it's something, it's very, very critical to the sources of politics in Nigeria and the future of Nigeria and the future of judiciary, the institutional issues in Nigeria. You see, yesterday was a very good day for Nigeria when we won that case in London. Yes. That is the gas deal case, as it were. But you see, the argument from the lawyers of the other side, the PNI lawyer, he said what they are faced with is as a result of institutional incompetency in Nigeria. I found that as an insult. You see, for a lawyer in London to say that our institutional system are incompetent, I found that very, very insulting. But come to look at it, can the judiciary show us that they are very, very competent at what they are doing? I do not care which side wins in this Supreme Court judgment, but it should be backed up with logic. It should be backed up with reasons. It should be backed up with clear issues that, oh, this is clearly this. You shouldn't be asking, you know, should I rely on this or should I rely on that as a justice of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mm-hmm. So it raised a deep concern about the position of Nigeria, about the position of the judiciary over this case as it stands today.
This is a really serious issue. Of course, as part of this, we see the fact that the CSU evidence that was released by the Chicago State University to Atiku Abubakar over this particular appeal issue has been termed inadmissible in court. You know, a lot of Nigerians were keeping fingers crossed, and there was expectation with how will this uncovering or unearthing of a certificate by Atiku affect the proceedings of the case. Now, when we of course we see the fact that the case still continues, but the evidence has been, you know, tagged inadmissible. So does it just mean that that is going to be thrown out of the window and let's continue with the challenge as it were?
Well, I don't think at this stage we cannot say it's inadmissible. Don't forget, the Supreme Court, they have not yet come back. Some opinion are saying it's inadmissible, of course, but of course it should come from the judges. We should wait and hear from the judges. let them be the ones to tell us that this is not admissible. Then we would understand where they are coming from. If they say this is not admissible, then we would have to look at it and say, why is it inadmissible? Does it mean that there were no grounds for us to admit this case, this evidence, or this evidence that are put forth by the article's lawyers? Until it comes to that point, we cannot say that it is inadmissible. The judges have gone back to have reserved judgment on the matter, and part of the judgment we are expecting when they come back is to tell us if this evidence is admissible or not. If they are going to put it as part of the logic behind any form of judgment or any ruling that may be coming from the Supreme Court in Nigeria. And that's part of the things that we are looking out for when a date is fixed and we are the Supreme Court receipt for this case to be heard. And we are going to look at that. We are going to look at what they are going to come up with in terms of the overwhelming evidence that has been brought forth by Article's team over this case. You see, this has a precedent in Nigeria, but you see, during the Shagari Awolowo election case, as it were, it was a matter of the judiciary trying to balance law and political expediency in that judgment, as it were, at that time. It was a matter where Shagari had scored a certain number of votes. Of course, it was over about 2 million votes above what Chief Awolowo scored at the time. But the argument was there was there was something in Nigerian constitution at that time that said you must win a quarter of each state. That's similar to this 25% of every state. And of course, Shagari had won 12 states, 12 states or 13 states. But you see, he did not get 25% in Kano State. I think he had about 19% in Kano State. Should he have had 25% in Kano State, it means that he would have been qualified to become the president of Nigeria. So the matter went to court, and the judgment was such that Nigerians were asked to, the judiciary, were to determine what is 1/3 of 19. If you were to define what is 1/3 of 19, and the judiciary made a mathematics and came up with 12 point something. And the Nigerians shouted and screamed that no, it should have been 13 instead of 12 point something. But of course, we let that go. It was minor. But this has to do with perjury. It has to do with forgery. It's quite different from what happened in 1979. And what we are going to look at is the judiciary giving out a judgment that would not set a wrong precedent in Nigeria, giving out a judgment that would be seen to be fair in its entirety. That's what we are looking at to come from the judiciary this time around.
Well, another twist to this is that we have seen statements being made. I'm trying to look up for that particular story that I've been looking at this morning. The body language of the former Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, we're trying to call up as we see it's been referred to as, that it is not going to hold sway in all of these activities that is happening. So we are wondering, what has Yemi Osinbajo said, and why is it biting on, Tinubu's end of the conversation? So it's more like calling bluff whatever former Vice President Yemi Osinbajo had said, but that isn't even coming up for me this morning. But once I get back to it, we'll just look into it this morning. But let's look at some other issues. Promises being made by the Tinubu-led administration, policy reforms, social safety net programs being initiated. Some were scrapped and updated. Speaking of the N-Power program now. But they have said that by January 2024, that's about 2 months away from now, that the student loan is going to take effect. If you remember vividly well, when that student loan conversation came up, there were a lot of conversations for and against. Oh, this is not going to place students in good light. Do you know how it's going to affect the students in the long run? It looks good in the immediacy, but let's look at long-term results. What are your general thoughts about the student loan? And hopefully, we have been promised implementation by January.
Yes, implementing the student loan scheme in January without a detailed analysis of what the how the eligibility standards and how it will be operating is something else completely. You know, one of the fears that was at the time was the government's intention may be to increase school fees and make education so expensive and now drive people to students to take a loan to go to school. But the deeper concern had always been on the implementation modality. How is the federal government going to implement this? They have said, of course, this would be done directly from the CBN and would be handled by the loans board. Of course, we know that in Nigeria, we need to be very, very thorough about understanding things from the very beginning. Otherwise, we keep seeing what we have been seeing in the past, that institutions come up with things and these things fail in progress because of implementation. The kind of implementation challenges that mainly we are seeing that may come out from here is about the implementation, the eligibility standards. Who are the students that are eligible for this loan? How is the payback? How is it going to be done? How are you going to hold people to it? How are you going to recover this money that they are given as loan from people? We have a situation in Nigeria already that we are having challenges with our employment level, and you are saying people will go take loan, go to school, come out from school, go for NYC, the government will still pay allowance for the NYC, they come back from the NYC. Where is the job? How are they going to repay the loan? What things are we putting in place for us to ensure that we increase on our employment standards? If you create jobs in the country, if you make things very well and good in terms of the economy running very, very well, then you can say you give out this loan. Look at it from this other side. You give 500,000 naira to a student to go to school. Before 4 years period, we don't know whether naira will be 5,000 naira per dollar at that time. So what's the real value of the loan that you've given out to the students? So what are you going to recoup as a loan that you have taken back from school? Or would you be shifting the goalposts? So stability of the economy should be what government should be focused on. If they want to make a grant, it's better we call it a grant. You give out the money, call it a grant. But if you say it is a loan that should be paid back, we need to look at all these things comprehensively to be able to say, oh, you have rolled out a good policy, or for the nation to be excited about this kind of policy that you have rolled out, as it were.
Serious concerns there. It would have been better if we were going for a grant instead of a student loan. Implementation issues. I remember you speaking about the case between the federal government versus the P&ID with regards to
the gas deal.
Gas deal. And you're saying, you know, that one of the lawyers on the P&ID's firm is saying part of the issues that they experienced in Nigeria was infrastructural decay,
institutional incompetence,
and how it affected them.
Yeah.
So, yes, you had mentioned that you took that as an insult, but to a very large extent, are those not statements that we should really look into? Because when we look at these institutional deformities and bring it back to like ventures and policies like student loans, are those not the same things that will eat into the fabric of these lofty ideas that have been brought forward by the federal government?
Excuse my sentiments, it's like this: if my father doesn't carry himself well and my friends are laughing at him, I will feel embarrassed. That is why I'm seeing it as an insult coming from an outsider to tell us that we have this institutional incompetence.
Not that we do not know that we have those issues.
Of course we have. But I expect us to work on it, of course. I expect us to strengthen our institutions. You see, when we talk about due process in Nigeria, we should take it serious. When we talk about governance, corporate governance in Nigeria, we should take it serious and ensure that there is compliance in all these areas that we are addressing. But you see, when we look at our institutions, one institution that is standing out right now is the judiciary. How they are going to paint Nigeria, how they are going to show Nigeria that Nigeria has institutions that are competent. is for them to come up with these things. There are so many things in Nigeria that may be happening at the moment that speaks so much volume about our institutional incompetency. We should not allow foreigners, we should not allow the foreign bodies to begin to look at us and disgrace us by telling us that our institutions were incompetent, that they observed incompetency in our institutions. We should not allow ourselves to do that. Of course, in-house, in what as a Nigerian, I tell you that I would point out 1, 2, 3, 4 institutions in Nigeria that are really exhibiting incompetency in their ways of doing things. Now, we should stop exhibiting this. And I am saying I felt insulted because a foreigner coming to tell us that our institutions are incompetent, caused by our people, you know, by our government, by our government institutions, is not something very palatable. It is something that we should discourage by making our institutions to really sit up to see how we could position ourselves, position our nation in a manner that we should gather international respect. Foreigners should respect us as a country by the way we are doing things in our nation.
Okay, something else I'm going to talk about is forex crisis. It's been on. Now, the Naira is selling at 1,220 Naira against the dollar. Mr. Marvell, when did you ever think that in Nigeria we will get to a day that the dollar will be, that the Naira will be competing against the dollar at 1,000 plus? Last week we closed at about 1,020 Naira and we thought that we had seen the worst. But standing at 1,220, that's a lot of crisis that is rocking that whole, you know, monetary policy thing. How can we come out of this quagmire? Because it's a serious issue.
It is very,
the
very
dependence on forex in Nigeria is really strong. So if the dollar is selling at 1,220 now, it means that we are going to be, you know, experiencing another dimension of multifaceted inflation because we import everything that we use in this country. What's the way out of this forex crisis?
You see, when I came in here, I sat down and I told you we're on the edge. Politically, we're on the edge. Look at that case in the Supreme Court. Economically, we're on the edge. Look at the fall of Naira to the level it has fallen to now. And I tell you, there are things, of course, that we should do, but it should have been a process. But you see, we should just look at this situation right now as the economic reality of the times. It is the reality of the times that we have found ourselves in the situation that we have found ourselves now. For us to address this, analytically speaking, you will see that the Naira, as it were, was just being printed and used without any production backing it up. Now, if you print Naira notes like what happened in Uganda several years back, you are just trying to kill your economy completely. You're just sitting down printing Naira. You remember Governor Obaseki screamed about this a few years back, that how can CBN print Naira notes to protect the Naira? Now, you see, government, they were spending a lot of money, over $1 billion every time, using it to block the Naira. Now, we are a nation that had been living in debt for a very, very long time. We're just living in borrowed times and acting in ways as if we do not know what the economic system should be. Imagine that the previous administration has just left. They entered into an oil swap deal. That oil swap deal simply means that all the production that we're having in terms of our oil production would go, has been taken on loan already. That's like everything that we are producing in the country is on loan. You don't have income. Nigeria doesn't, let me put it this way. It's as if you are selling your oil $30 million now. What actually comes to the federal government, that's the present government, to use for salaries at its administration and so on, is about $1 billion. You use 29 billion to pay loan that was used in the previous administration to pay themselves allowances, to buy cars for themselves, to build houses for themselves, to steal part of it for themselves. Those are the things that we are paying for right now. So when the President Tinubu, came into power, and he said, allow Naira for the forces of demand and supply. Our nakedness is now shown that we don't have anything to hold our Naira. We are not producing anything.
So would you say that that particular move by the president, you know, to allow the Naira to float in that manner is helpful? Is it really helping us at this time?
He's just protecting our future. Because if we continued borrowing for the next 8 years that he will stay, he can do that. The economy will collapse completely and Nigeria will become a failed state. That is the reality. Because they will get to a point that you cannot borrow again. Don't forget that this oil swap deal was entered into by the previous government, not because they chose to enter into it, but because they were looking for money to run government. And they did not have sources to borrow anymore. We left IMF, we went to this, we even borrowed from China, and we looked around where to borrow. Before the last option, okay, you have oil, be giving us your oil, and for this money that we are going to give you. And we don't have enough oil, we are being given. You see, if we were to produce oil 2 million barrels per day, now we are producing about, is it 1.6 or 1.7?
Absolutely.
So we are not even meeting up our production target in oil. And we are solely dependent on oil. That's the problem in Nigeria. So if we are solely dependent on oil, the oil is going the way it is going, then we've removed subsidy from oil. Don't we have other things to sell? Don't we have palm oil to sell? Don't we have solid minerals to sell? Don't we have...
We've seen the federal government make some moves.
Apart from the natural resources that we have to sell, can we produce things and be selling? Instead of importing toothpick, can we produce toothpick in Nigeria? Can we produce this iframe in Nigeria? Can we produce the clothes we wear in Nigeria? Can we patronize our own made in Nigeria products? You see, most companies come into Nigeria, set up manufacturing concerns, and what they're simply doing is to import and just put those things together. When they say there's a car production company in Nigeria, it's an assemblage. Where are we getting the steel from? What is the status of our Jakarta steel mill? I've been to a Jakarta steel mill. Expansive, beautiful, very wonderful place. If you go in there, you see the investment in that place, the industry, the staff quarters, the roads map and everything. You would weep for Nigeria. We had one here. It's not as big as a Jakarta steel. I'm talking about the newsprint at Okuiboko. What is happening to the newsprint? We had that newsprint. We had malina trees planted all over the places. What happened to it? So we cannot even produce all these things. If we were to produce these things and we are able to export, other than importing, what is our import-export ratio? So you need to, for us to make our Naira to be strong, we need to have something to sell. China would not be lamenting because they are collecting the foreign exchange. But we don't have things to sell to collect foreign exchange to back up.
To cushion. Okay, now speaking about Naira cushioning, you know, the Naira against the whole forex crisis, we see that Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edu, has said that the economy is going to receive $10 billion in foreign exchange inflow in the next couple of weeks to ease liquidity pressure in the foreign exchange market. So we are looking at borrowing another $10 billion, investing it as a cushioner for the Naira. Is this in the first place a good economic move for the country at this time?
You see, the federal government at this stage, they have started acting in desperate ways. You don't make haphazard moves. You know, that fire brigade approach we talk about, how do we cushion this, how do we make this, you go hold this, hold that, as if a drowning person is in the sea trying to find life. That's what the federal government is doing right now. It is not something that would be beneficial to Nigeria in any way. We should be able to speak truth to ourselves. If you are borrowing that, how much did you borrow to buy vehicles for the House of Reps members? What was it very needful at this time for you to invest in those allowances, in buying those vehicles, in doing that? Of course, as a work tool, it's very, very good if we have the resources to get those work tools. Of course, we should be able to get them. But why say, oh, you are going to provide liquidity for the foreign market and you are going to borrow again to do this in order to fight? It's the same thing if you want to subsidize the foreign exchange, you want to subsidize Naira, go ahead and do it outrightly and say you've subsidized the Naira. If you do the mathematics, you would also see that they have said they have removed petroleum subsidy. We are still buying petrol less than 700 or so. I think maybe it has reached 700 now. I don't know.
About 600.
I don't know what happened on Monday.
As it got.
But ahead. But you see, if it is like this, you are secretly subsidizing petroleum products.
But we've continued to see even Melikari, boss of NNPC, come out to say that the federal government is not, subsidizing that petroleum product in any way. But we've also seen the Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria come out to say that the federal government is still subsidizing.
That's why they cannot import.
So who exactly is telling the lie here?
It's obvious. This is very, very obvious that the marketers, they are free to import, but they cannot. The windows have been opened to them. Come on, import fuel. Let everybody, the market was liberalized in that way. Let everybody be able to get product and sell to the people. Now, if they want to buy, when they bring it, they will be selling at a loss. Because is NNPC buying from a different market? Of course not. They are buying from the same source that NNPC will go to buy. So NNPC is able to buy because don't also forget a few weeks back, an NNPC official came out to scream that the federal government is owing them some kind of billion of naira. Where is that from? It's from the subsidy amount that they are supposed to give to NNPC to be able to import fuel to sell. We all know the price of this thing, PMS, in the international market. So where is Nigeria getting their PMS to be able to sell at 600 and something naira when oil is hitting $100
per barrel? But when we say, we're talking about this pricing now,
yes,
at 600 plus, Nigerians are really, really suffering to even be able to purchase. I mean, Mr. Marvel, remember that at some point in this country, 5,000 naira could actually give you enough fuel for you to go buy.
Yes.
But 5,000 naira it's about 7 liters or thereabouts if at all it gets there. Yeah. Let's not also forget the very porous nature of some of our filling stations. That won't even take you. So when we are saying that, yes, okay, the federal government is still or not still subsidizing petrol, marketers are saying, like you just also reiterated, that if we are subsidizing, if we are not subsidizing, petrol is meant to be more expensive.
Yes.
Mr. Marvel, if petrol is more expensive than it is right now, how do you think Nigerians are going to survive? A lot of people have parked their cars and are opting for public transport because people cannot keep up.
Oh yeah, that is why we should be able to tell ourselves the truth as a nation. Now, we are in this stage. There is no country in the world. There is no government in the world. I've tried to research. I don't know if there is any that is not paying subsidy on one thing or the other. There is no country of the world. So we should be able to tell ourselves the truth. I would like a situation where our government, when they come up with a policy and they make a mistake, they come back to tell us, sorry, we have made a mistake. When the federal government came out to say, come, let us float the naira, let us remove subsidy, I personally supported them because I see it as a good policy. If you float the naira, let the reality dawn on us that we need to produce something and sell and make foreign exchange to be able to stabilize our economy. The world has become a global village. We are part of the world. We are doing business with the world. We are traveling out of the world. We are importing things from the world. We should be able to compete with the international community. We should be able to compete with every productive countries in the world. But are we productive? Are we doing what we are supposed to do? If this policy was to drive us to become productive, that would be nice. Not that you come out with this policy and corruption creeps in. One of the things that affected our foreign exchange as it started was that the CBN people began to issue dollars to the banks. Banks were not using it from Form A. They were not using it for any import, for anything at all. They were now selling it back to the bureau de change, that's the black market as we call them, to resell them at a margin, and the margin kept expanding. Suddenly CBN came out and said, oh, is this what is going, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and they came out with some other things. Today they are talking about digitalizing foreign exchange and so on, and doing this and doing that. Those are all measures that if you sat down, plant it, think through it, and go through the implementation of it, you would likely get it right. But where you are not sincere about your implementation, that is where the problem comes from. The policies may be good, But how are we handling the implementation of these policies? How are we going about the implementation of these policies? This policy would have been excellently done, but for the banks, the CBN, and what deals they were doing with the foreign exchange brought us to this place that we are. The gas thing, the gas price thing, and so on. You heard yesterday the gas price that somebody is adding 7 million naira to 20 metric tons of gas. Instead of selling at 9 million, they are selling it at 16 or 17 million.
And how that comes back to bite the common man. There's so much conversation we need to have, balancing policies, the reality on ground, and how we can do better. But our time is really fast spent, and there was a lot more we wanted to touch. We definitely will have you back sometime so we can still look into these conversations. But just in a few seconds, do you have any concluding thoughts this morning before we wrap up the show?
Yes, I just want to talk about the strengthening of our institutional systems. It would do well for Nigeria. First of all, INEC is the major problem in Nigeria. INEC is the major problem in Nigeria. If we strengthen that institution, our election process would be better. Nigeria should think more of meritocracy. Let's have people on merit in positions, and we'll be well and fine in this country. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Marvelous, for coming on the show this morning. Of course, he is an organizational development consultant and human resource consultant, of course, coming on the show and giving us your wealth of knowledge. We absolutely appreciate your time. But we apologize. That's the much we can take this morning. Of course, you can see how the conversation was going, but we can't take all of it. My name is Uyai Aneka, and until we return to your screens tomorrow to do more talk on what's going on around the globe, remain blessed, and let's see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
SpectrumTv, broadening your horizon.
Every day marks a day of significance.
That in view of the apology tendered by this former minister who had earlier been cleared by this August Assembly,
as we face critical issues, developments and events which shape our social and political landscape here in Nigeria and beyond. Political Spectrum is a program specially designed to help make sense of all the moving parts of developments and occurrences in our nation's polity and political economy.
There is nothing wrong with Nigeria, but there's everything wrong.
The education, factual, smartest, and unbiased reportage.
Stay tuned to Political Spectrum. Political Spectrum. All sides matter at the round table. Political Spectrum. Exclusive.